good, but
Really?
Warren, how's it going?
I can't believe it.
Oh, it's good. I know. What'd you say?
Please been good.
I thought I'd just say. This isn't even right. I'm Carla. So you know Colby. Right. Oh, Colby. I do.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, okay, sure.
This is very
Well, all right. Good to know you. Yeah.
a lot of
Well, you know, I was at the law school last year. Got up, had turned the TV on the news. It was Aztec High School. Kind of like, oh shit, there goes my house.
Thanks for coming, everyone, to our last meeting, this stage of the
Oh, we did.
flood study. There's some illustrations, exhibits on the wall over here indicating, the old exhibits are here indicating the existing condition, and then the smaller exhibits indicate what happens if we build the preferred alternative. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim D'Angelo from AECom, and he'll take it from there. Jim?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you're here. I know there's a football game in 30 minutes. So we'll keep it informative, and hopefully it'll be what you need to hear. Those in the back hallway, there are some cheap seats up here are still open if you want to get close. Come on in. So we are at the last meeting to talk about the Hampton, Arroyo, the Kokopelli subdivision, the Blanco, Arroyo. And I'm going to go through what we've done at kind of a big picture perspective, just remind you a lot of it you've already heard. And then Mark and Sherrick, who are with me, are going to go and talk to you about the details. We're going to use a lot of vernacular tonight. We're going to talk about the 100-year floodplain and the 25-year floodplain law. We're going to talk about things called the preferred alternative. So I just wanted to take a second and remind you what those terms were. Because folks like myself and my colleagues, we use them every day. And we forget that we're even using these words. So if there's something we don't go over and you don't understand, please raise your hand or just yell out the question, because I'm sure you're not the only person that doesn't know the words that are coming out of my mouth. So the 100-year floodplain is a floodplain, the area that you can expect to be wet during a storm that occurs, statistically speaking, once every 100 years. Now, I know I went over this last time. Could you get 200-year storms in a year? Yes, you could. You could get two in the same day. Very unlikely. But the point is that by no means, having survived a 100-year storm, can you go to your deathbed thinking, I'll never experience another 100-year storm. It could happen again. A 25-year storm is a lot more common. Similarly, that is a storm that has a 25% chance of occurring in 100 years. I'm sorry. Did I do that right? Once every 25 years. Now, the reason we're going to talk about the 25-year storm is because, statistically speaking, it tends to be where the cost-benefit analysis sticks. So most of the things that we build in this world, or insure in this world, have a lifespan of about 25 years mathematically. So your mortgage is 30 years, 25 years is close. If we're to build something out of concrete that's going to be impacted by water, we'd assume that would have a 25-year lifespan. And that's really important, because the project that we undertook was to understand what we could accomplish, what things we could design that would be most likely to receive federal funding so you could build it, right? Because money is an important part. We're going to talk a little bit about that money as well. But that 25-year cycle is really where the federal breakdown happens. The feds don't like to build things that last 50 years, and it's almost impossible to get a 50-year storm culvert funded through a grant. So we looked at the 25-year. The 100-year I brought up is really important because that's what FEMA talks about. FEMA talks about the 100-year. If you have flood insurance, it's because you're within the 100-year floodplain. That's a number that was picked back in the 1970s because of no good reason other than it sounded good. I'll tell you that for sure. So, it's a little bit of background. The preferred alternative is a term we're going to use tonight, and that's what we've done is we've taken a look at all the analysis and we've come up with a series of solutions, and we're calling that the preferred alternative. Part of our analysis to look at other alternatives, kind of mucking around with the model, seeing what works, a little bit more scientific than that, but you can imagine dropping in different Lego pieces to see which one fits best. We went through that exercise. We have what's called preferred alternative. Really, this is your best solution. Okay, so I'm going to go into the formal introduction, but before I start, are there any other questions? All right, great. We'll be quick. All right, here's what we're going to go through tonight. We're going to talk about the project goals, the current status, plan details, costs, and next steps. And this is myself. I'm Jim D'Angelo. I'm the hazard mitigation lead for AECOM here in the Southwest. It's my job to work with communities to help them understand the hazards that they face and come up with solutions to address those hazards. But I can't do it alone. Mark McIntosh is our lead engineer for this project. He's the gentleman who works with Sheriff Campbell, and these guys are the ones that made these wonderful maps that are on the walls and really did all the science behind it. I'm just the guy that gets to talk with you folks. But tonight, you're lucky, we're going to make them do some of the speaking and explain that technical aspects of it a little bit further. What were our project goals? What did we set out to do? What was it, 6 months ago when I stood in this room and talked with you folks? We're going to try to reduce the risks and impacts to life. So flooding is a risk. It could be a very bad morning when you wake up and realize your paper got washed down the street. Or it could be a risk, hey, how am I going to get home? There's a lot of water on the road. We want to understand the drainage characteristics that lead to those risks, understand how those drainage characteristics impact your life. We wanted to create public awareness and understanding of the problem. So that's why we're spending time with you folks trying to explain it, because it's more than just water falls on the ground, rolls downhill, comes in my living room. There's a little bit more to it than that. But that's how you're impacted, right? You don't care where the water lives until it's in your living room. So that does work together. But it doesn't do us any good to understand that unless we've come up with potential solutions, and we'll talk about those tonight. And then we can talk about potential solutions in the realm of mitigation actions. When we talk about mitigation actions and such, that it's a solution that will solve part of the problem today and part of your problem tomorrow. We're looking forward to what might happen, not necessarily backwards to what did happen. Pretty important distinction. And lastly, create the conceptual drawings, rough estimates of costs for those mitigations. It doesn't do you any good to know that you could build a thing and you could build it tomorrow if you don't know how much it's going to cost or what the impacts of building that thing are. So we've done a little bit of that work as well. Any questions so far? All right. We did this work in 3 phases. Phase 1 was data collection. We came here, we talked with you folks, we had some handouts, collected some information, got the feedback from you. A lot of people pointed up on the map and said, hey, this is my backyard. I know when it rained, it flooded here. This is a problem. We got scientific data from the community, from other sources. We looked at rainfall data from the Corps of Engineers, USGS, and that sort of thing. Phase 2 is where we did most of our science. We looked at hydrology and hydraulics. So hydrology is how much water will fall out of a cloud. And we talk about hydrology in such 2 inches per hour, 3 inches per hour, rainfall rates. But then what does that translate into? How much water is that actually in the channel? That's hydrology. Hydraulics is what does that water do as it's moving over the land. Okay, so you can imagine a lot of water moving through a very little space. Where does that water go? It gets higher, it goes faster. That's what hydraulics tells us. And the two work together, because we have to know how much water for sizing our culverts. We need to know how fast it's moving or what might be in it for our design process. In phase 3, alternatives analysis. So once we understood the characteristics of the problem, we created those big maps that were up on the wall. We came here for our second meeting to talk to you about, okay, this is what we know about your problem. This is what we've seen. Now it's time to come up with solutions for that. And that's where the alternatives analysis is. And that's a lot about what we'll talk about this evening. So here we are. The alternatives analysis has been completed. We've calculated estimated costs to complete those projects. And we've begun our conceptual 30% drawings. Now, a 30% drawing is a little bit more than the back of the envelope or napkin drawing. It starts to look at the engineering that would be required to actually build that thing, whatever that might be. And 30% drawings are important because right at the 30% level is when you can begin to understand the costs that are impacted, and that's where you need to be with your understanding of the engineering to seek federal money. So if you were to go to FEMA and say, hey, I've got a problem, they're going to say, where's your engineering? And they're going to want to see a 30% drawing. So that's why we picked that milestone to take our drawings to. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherrick and Mark. They're going to talk to you about some of the solutions and show you what they've done and a little bit more about what's on those maps. And then I'll close off the meeting. Mark?
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, guys.
I'm Mark Sherrick. First, I wanted to start off by presenting, for those who don't know, some of the infrastructure that we typically deal with for flood control. And this, mainly we have channels, culverts, and storm drains. And so I just got some images online. This is two of the options that we evaluated for potential alternatives that would work in this particular setting. So concrete or riprap line channels. And when we get into the alternatives, I'll tell you what we are recommending for each one. Culverts, right here on the left, that's what we typically call a box culvert. Concrete box culvert with, you can see the wing walls, head walls. And this is a corrugated metal pipe with the ends just projecting, so it's just placed with fill just dumped right over it. That's likely a temporary access crossing. Down here, you can see that pipe has almost like a round pipe that's been squashed, and the term that we use is squash pipe. That's also a corrugated metal pipe. And then this I just chose because this is a good representation of what you want to see downstream of a culvert to prevent any undermining. As water's shooting out of this culvert, it's going to start to erode right here. And if you don't have protection like that, that culvert will start to erode, eventually float, and then your road gets washed away. Not very many good pictures of storm drains because they're all underground. So I found this schematic that essentially shows what how a storm drain functions. So we have runoff that will be generated on a landform, typically flowing down the street. It'll enter a catch basin, dump into a main trunk line, and then eventually dump into a detention basin, into another water course, or into a river. These here are typical images of, this is just a typical curb opening during an event. And you can see the flow is coming in this direction, but it's not all dumping in there. This is something that we are looking at implementing in the Kokopelli area. And this is a trench drain, which essentially crosses the road. So these work well for capturing drainage across the entire road, where these types of inlets capture runoff at the edges of the road. Anything you want to add there?
There's a series, for those of you that live in the Kokopelli subdivision, there's a series of these type of inlets on the upper left that are in that subdivision as well. So.
And then you'll see this vertical curve here. That provides the capacity for the road. And typically when you have a crown road, your drainage will end up here, and then you at least have a single, maybe double driving dry lane. That's typical requirements that we'll adhere to. So using this information, we started applying or looking at those different types of features for each of our study areas. What would work best? What constraints are we looking at? Right of way, road fill, impacts to traffic, emergency access, those types of things. And so I'll start here at the upstream end. We've sized a detention basin, which also will serve as a sediment trap, for lack of a better term. And then we'll have an outflow here, and then we're planning or recommending that a channel be constructed through this area, meet natural grade or natural elevation at the zip box culvert there, and then just continue with the natural channel section down to the ends. And then across here, we've identified existing and proposed culverts. So the green represents culverts that have sufficient capacity for a 25-year event and no upgrades are needed. However, the red, these culverts are culverts where they do not have the 25-year minimum capacity and something needs to be done there. And so if you guys recall the different types of culvert materials, each culvert will work here, but some culverts have more advantage as far as constructability. and impacts to residents and others. And so we've modeled all those different ones, and that's what we've accounted for in our cost estimates for the recommended plan. So currently, we're looking at the arch corrugated metal pipe. One is cost, it's considerably cheaper than concrete. You can fit more, or not more, but a comparable amount of water in it with a reduced footprint. Anything to add to Blanco there?
I want to point on this graphic here is the location of the channel and the basin are obviously at the upper end of this watershed, and that provides the majority of benefit to downstream property owners, as opposed to putting something farther downstream. So that gives you a little bit more bang for your buck by doing something at the top end. So.
Yeah, in addition to construction type projects to improve capacity of the water course, one of the recommendations is going to be, annual maintenance. However, we're not including that cost per se in a construction improvement cost. So now is the Kokopelli area. Many familiar with the proposed XTO basin up here. That's moving forward. So that's providing a pretty good amount of flood protection. And we've got size it for 50 cubic feet per second, leaving that, which is much less than what was coming out before. Then it's going to follow the natural water course, cross a culvert here, into improved channel. We found out today that this is actually going to be an additional culvert in lieu of a channel there. And then we've got a take that back, a channel here that's going to capture runoff from the bluffs behind and then prevent it from entering the subdivision. A lot of this flooding in this area was caused by runoff coming through here and really causing issues at this intersection. So this channel really mitigates the amount of water entering this particular intersection. And then we've got, some recommendations where to improve the curbs, raise the curbs, the vertical curbs, or higher vertical curbs. And also in talking with the city earlier, based on some of the information we've been sharing, we've identified additional locations right here to implement a detention and sediment basin, and also potentially some other areas up here for future projects. So those will also be included in our recommended plan. Anything else for Kokopelli?
The storm drain that Mark pointed out here, the intersection, there is an existing storm drain there, and it's a bit undersized, and our efforts looked at upsizing that storm drain and basically maintaining the alignment where it outfalls into the Hampton right now. So we would maintain those two existing catch basins that are there, for those of you that are familiar with that area.
Is that the corner of Bridge and
Yes, Slaughtered Wolf.
Flywheel?
And then we're also going to be adding an outfall, upgrading the outfall that's currently located right here. The two outfalls that are currently existing right here, based on our analysis, no upgrades are needed for those because of the improvements from the channel and the storm drain. So any questions so far on Blanco or Kokopelli? Yes.
Is there a way to get a copy of the one on Blanco, because you can't see it?
Sure. I mean, then we could, after we're done here, we've got some extra bigger maps you can actually get in and see. And then, we'll be here to explain all that.
On Blanco, are there any proposed curb and gutter improvements on the street itself above the existing culverts?
I'll take that question. We did not look at curb and gutter in Blanco due to the fact that a lot of the homes are at or below, or very similar in grade elevation to the roadways in the area. So by implementing a catch or a vertical curb and gutter or something like that, you might have the tendency to pond up water behind on the backside of the curb. So we tried to we thought about that and discarded it because of that reason.
And typically vertical curb for a two-dimensional model like this, the model doesn't recognize a 6-inch curb for conveyance. So that's just, recommendations. We're going to include locations where we might, and you'll see it in particular in Kokopelli, where we're going to show, okay, this street's flooded, which is working the way it should, being conveying water, but it might be a little too wide. If you add a river curve, you might be able to contain it. Okay?
Could we go back over there to Blanco Street and answer me a question, please? Some of the problems that's up there is engineering of the city.
Right here?
They caused the problem.
Are you talking?
Right where it turns right there on
Right there.
the, starts getting crazy right there,
Blanco Polar.
right there. And that wasn't the case until the city started rebuilding streets and not paying attention to what they was doing. That was not a problem before that. Now it is a problem.
Okay.
So when you said, that concerned me when you said you just bypassed that with it, not too worried about it. Well, it wasn't caused by the people who lived there. That's what I'm getting at.
No.
Anyway,
Okay. Okay, so this, in addition to what's on the walls there and the maps that we got here, this is the existing conditions that we developed a while back and fine-tuned. And so what you can see here is runoff from the bluffs or from the watershed is entering in to Blanco. We've got runoff coming down this way. And then you can see by the colors on the maps, as you go from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, that indicates flow depth. So you can see really along the Blanco Arroyo here in the middle, a purple line. And then out in these redder areas, this, when the Rio Grande culvert, we assumed it was blocked, like happened in last year. Flow just starts overtopping and going down the streets and everything. And these flood depths are on the order of 1 to 3.5 inches. So in these green areas, then you're talking more like a foot and a half, approaching 2. And so really in this situation, Blanco became the Arroyo. And without recommended improvements, particularly upstream, this would still occur. So that's the existing conditions, and again, this is a 25-year event. You can see on the maps, the 100-year event is larger as well. Anything you want to add to the existing? Okay, so this is the proposed condition where we implemented the detention basin up here, channelized, and then added the culverts at the locations where identified, where we identified culverts should be upgraded. So you can see, that Blanco is no longer the channel that it used to be. You're still going to get flooding, and but it's on the order of 1 to 3.5 inches. And keep in mind, this area, this is all rainfall coming. Anything that you see here is rainfall that's also being dropped on within this part of the watershed. Any questions so far on?
That area that's very red there at the top of Blanco, just
This guy?
yes,
Or
sir,
this
right
one?
there. So
This
where does that water come from? So that there's a big concentration of water right there,
Yeah.
and then obviously downstream. But where is it?
Where does this water come from?
Yes, sir.
In addition to this contributing area, it's coming from an area up here. So it blows, and it's pretty steep up here. And
South of there too, and north of there too.
what's that, Mark?
There's a subdivision right north of there on Pollard Street that has very inadequate drainage.
This one?
It's in the same place.
Yeah, and I recall during our field recon, driving down Pollard, if I remember right, this goes down and this collects here, and so everything ends up draining essentially to this point here. You can see a ridge, and so this is probably where the grade break is. But you're getting flow from wrapping around here and runoff coming down here. And so what you see here, in particular on the road, is these roads really act as channels conveying the runoff. And at a certain point, it'll start to reach the road and inundate the areas outside of it.
Point here to make too is that area is now, I don't know if we can go back to existing conditions, but that flow depth, maximum flow depths in that area now on the order of, less than a foot, about 0.7, 0.8 feet, but existing condition a little bit deeper than that.
You're talking channelizing the upper end of Blanco Arroyo, but not channelizing down through town?
Right. I mean, that's essentially based on some feedback that we received the last meeting where property lines go right into the middle of the channel. And so we tried to, with this particular scenario, look at a solution that would not require channelization. Because if we did that, that's going to require right-of-way acquisition. People would have to give up their property.
But if you increase the size of the culverts on Rio Grande and all the way down through, all that water is going to go down and flood those people out.
It would be at a reduced rate due to the implementation of the basin at the top end of the,
How many acres in the basin?
about on the order, about 10 and a half acre feet. It's less than 5 acres in surface area.
And in a 25-year event, how long will it take that basin to fill?
To fill? Probably fill in less than, I'd say 6 to 10 hours, something to that effect.
It has to reach probably about 4 feet before it starts flowing. And then once it gets to max stage, the reason, one of the, how we came up with the size of that basin and the overflow and weir and structure for that was simply based on the narrowest section between Zia and the highway here. What was the narrow section on Blanco? What's that capacity? So if I remember right, let's say it's 150 cubic feet per second. So that was our target discharge for the detention basin, so that it would never exceed the capacity of that pinch point in the channel. Does that make sense?
Another point with the basin I want to make clear is that it would have, the concept would be to have a low flow pipe so that it could bleed off. We certainly wouldn't want a reservoir upstream just with no bleed off in it, so it would have a bleed off pipe, something on the order of 24-inch pipe or something like that could bleed off over time. Meter flows out.
On this particular basin that you're speaking of, is this intended to take care of the property that is closest to the high school? Just the side of the high school, where the large red showing is, right, just down, just this way a little bit, right in there.
That
What's
basin,
going to take care of that basin?
I mean, we would have to implement another basin at this location to minimize that. But here, the flooding is generally contained in the streets, half a foot or less. So we could implement or look at implementing a basin there. However, that basin here was intended to reduce the flooding on Blanco.
Blanco.
So, yeah.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, what did you say that it was supposed to drop it over here on this last one? How much? 3 and 4 feet? Is that what you said? Because people next door, we've had 3 and 4 feet of water in the basement. And
No, the flow depths flowing in the road and on the surface are on the order of less than half a foot. So, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to fill in the basin.
Of course. But now in this proposal that you have now that you're working on, when will we get to this part of it over here? Because I understand the Blancos first. Is that right?
Yeah, Blanco, that was our mission to resolve the issues, break it out.
What's a particular time frame on this other one?
We'll have to regroup. I mean, we'll have to look at a solution for that one. Because we just look for solutions at this stage for Blanco itself.
I think it's been a couple of months ago, I saw the workers and I stopped to ask what they were doing. And it was on the corner of a church in Blanco. They were putting in some type of facility there. But they said that actually the people that would buy them said it helped the last time they had some water. Do you know what that was?
We talk to the city and find out what they implemented there.
You know what that was?
We installed a valley gutter.
Okay, all right.
Just across the street, there's across.
Valley gutter. Okay. How do we go about getting a valley gutter?
Well, if we recommended valley gutters for cross drainage across the street,
Mhm.
you're not gonna see impacts on that, on a map like this, because the valley gutters might be this deep, you know what I'm saying? And it won't reflect because of the way these models are set up. But it would on a different type of analysis.
Okay. So if it's not going to reflect on this, how do we get somebody with the city to act on it? That's what I'm asking.
Well,
I mean, I understand what you're saying with this proposal. I understand.
okay. Well, I mean, part of what we're scoped to do is to look at resolving the issues on Blanco.
Mhm.
And anything in the area that we see additionally, we come up with recommendations based on engineering solutions that we've used and implemented in the past. So for instance, in this area, we'd say, okay, this could benefit from a detention basin, perhaps a storm drain system, that type of solution. That'll be in our recommended plan.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm asking is how do we get on the list to get that to you folks?
Oh.
Well, all of these, excuse me, so all of these improvements that we're talking about tonight will be prioritized, and so it can, first of all, will be funding, and although we will be seeking funding, the city will be taking on some of these smaller projects. We're going to start on a project on Monday in the Sabina area, just with public works forces. And we'll be moving through the town based on priority. So I think I met with you a couple of weeks ago, and I told you that you were on the list.
Bill, can you elaborate on the Sabina deal?
We're going to put the culverts in along Sabina between Stagecoach and the road.
What stage
Or I mean Sagebrush.
So you're gonna
I always
basically
keep those.
culvert that.
I always keep
that-
those confused.
You're going to culvert that right there and cover it flat.
We'll be installing a 36-inch culvert along Sabina between the east side of Sagebrush and the Hampton Arroyos. And then we will be coming up by your house, and cutting the street, and putting another culvert across the street there.
Okay.
And this is all in anticipation of the Arroyo and the culvert network being able to handle the outfall from the XTO detention pond.
Okay.
So there's no point
When
in
is-
building the detention pond and having the outfall come from that if we can't control the outfall water. So that's what we're doing. We're starting on that on next week.
But you're not, what she's worried about, you're not gonna actually, the dish that's there that goes by our fence and down to the sagebrush? You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? You're not covering that
No.
up or doing anything?
No.
Okay. And, the XTO retention pond, so whatever, silt pond.
Detention pond, yeah.
Yeah, whatever you call it. When is that, when do they start?
All of the agreements have been signed, and the XTO people are moving forward with hiring a contractor to build that.
Is there gonna be anything done to the left of that, in that big, where all that concrete and all that junk is? Is there gonna be anything done with that?
I don't know what you mean.
XTO locations here, the nearest house is right here. And then it drops into that big basin right above, right to the right of the XTO locations where all the,
The XTO detention pond will outfall into the Sabina Arroyo right across from the Laniers. And that arroyo will carry it down to the culverts that cross the Sabina right by your house.
Is that
Right,
what you're
and
going
then
to do?
we will be cutting across that street again to put another 30-inch culvert across that street. So there'll be 2 culverts crossing Sabina there. Right, and then the water will flow down the ditch that you were just talking about by your fence to sagebrush and flow under sagebrush. And across the street from there, that's where we'll be starting on Monday to install a 36-inch culvert from that side of sagebrush to the arroyo.
Okay. Are you gonna deepen that ditch going past our wash?
No.
Or going past our fence?
No.
It's not gonna be deepened or?
There isn't any point in deepening it because the bottom of the arroyo is always going to find the same elevation as the bottom of the culverts. So if we would deepen that ditch, it would just fill back up with sand again until it got to the bottom of the culvert.
I got a question for you. You said that this is all this is off this stuff, it's on something else. You said this is all prioritized? Can we see a list of the priorities?
There's not a priority list. I haven't even seen the list for these guys yet.
I thought you told Ms. Dow that was a priority. Stuff was a priority.
I said they would all be prioritized. And that's based on cost and available funding, and this XTO outfall is more important because we got to be able to build a ditch to handle the outfall from the XTO detention pond, or the water will be all over the place.
So you prioritize this yourself?
No, I talked with the city manager and we prioritize it together.
Part also what goes into the prioritization is the sequence of construction, and this particular area is a good example. You always want to build the downstream infrastructure first. We don't want to implement the basin, let water out, and none of this be improved, because then you're just going to cause problems. So we always move downstream to up with, along with costs and schedule when we prioritize projects.
Where you're looking right now, where you're shining your, yep, right there, explain that. What is that?
Oh, this is just a graphical illustration of where that pipe is going to go that Bill was talking about. Currently, there's a 24-inch, did you say?
Where are we?
Sagebrush that dumps in, goes behind this person's house.
Currently, that's just a 24-inch culvert.
Yeah, so that's undersized, and that's going to be what you're starting on Monday. Is to
We're
upgrade
going to
that.
put a 36-inch culvert right next to that 24-inch.
So that's the outfall for this entire system. So we want to improve that first, and then work our way upstream.
Right.
Is the work that the city's going to be doing, is that a recommendation of AECom, or is this, are you doing it on your own?
Some of it's on my own and some of it's recommended by the AE.
Okay.
That's what I asked you, is you prioritizing this?
As I said, I sat down with the city manager and we prioritized it together.
Some of these analyses have helped corroborate some of the, as part of the point of this too, is it corroborates the things that have occurred in the development area.
What you'll see on the illustrations and exhibits tonight is the result of a preferred alternative. But what these diagrams really give us is a pinpoint location of where we need to improve. For instance, if we need to improve a particular intersection and put in a cross pan because we have puddling up the road, then that should be identified on these plans. Not necessarily the installation of the culvert, or the cross pan, but it'll identify where the water is puddling or storing. So based on these diagrams, then I can identify areas that need improvement. For instance, Dennis lives on the end of a cul-de-sac, and even though we're making improvements throughout the Kokopelli area, we've identified on these improvement plans that we're still going to have to dig through his backyard and put a 36-inch culvert from the front of his property to the back. That's one of the things that this study has shown us. And there's other locations that we mentioned of the 6-inch vertical curbs. There will be road curb in some of the areas in Kokopelli will be changed out to 6-inch vertical curb to help deter the water from running out of the street and on the private property. But we have to keep in mind that all this costs money. And that's partially where the public works of the city comes in, is that we can do things a lot cheaper than going out to contract. So those little projects that we have around town that we can do less expensively, we're going to take that on ourselves, like putting this culvert in. We've already purchased the culvert. That's why we can start it on next week.
You know, follow up on that, something to keep in mind, and may not make you feel any better, is mitigation is a moving target. Okay, so I've been to a lot of communities, and everybody wants their community fixed today. There's nothing that we can do, design and engineer, money aside, that'll stop all the flooding at all. It's just kept it in. There's always going to be some sort of a problem. Things change. What we're trying to do with this study is we've identified 3 areas to look at, and as part of that, created these mappings. And as Bill said, it'll show us the next set of areas to look at. It'll show you the next set of priorities to draw. And creating that priority list is going to be fluid, because not only is it money and engineering, but it's also political willpower, or maybe it's right of way, or maybe it's environmental concerns, what have you. Things come up. So it's going to be a constant moving mitigation story for your community. You're going to go ahead, and even if you were to install all of the things that we've recommended in another 10, the next time it rains real hard, there's going to be another mud puddle someplace that's a problem. That's a fact, no matter what community you're in.
And remember, these are the 25-year diagrams. The last flood we had was 500-year plus. So there, as Jim just said, there's nothing the city can do to help you with a flood like that. The best thing for you to do is get flood insurance.
And one thing I
Church
think,
went from $600 a year to $6,000
Yeah.
because of the 2 floods that I had on the house. This last one just cost me $70,000 for the house.
Those 500-year floods seem to be coming about.
Yeah.
In the last 17 years, I think we've had about 5 of them.
Well, you know, just a month ago, I had water all but, I don't know, close to a foot in my front door. That was a month ago. That wasn't a 100-year flood or a 25-year flood. That was just a month ago.
Are they still talking about making that bypass around the city? Because that's gonna affect things too.
The arterial is under design, and actually the second stage is being paved this week. I guess the short answer is yes.
Is this still gonna come out by the pond?
Yeah.
By increasing on Blanco the size of those culverts, that's, or the channel down below that is based on basically the 25-year flood. But by having large culverts in there and getting water down to that point in a 50-year flood, aren't you in fact just going to be forcing more water down that channel, or allowing more water to flow through those culverts, whereas now it backs it up and it does run it down the streets?
no. This basin here, although it's sized for the 25-year event, it is going to peel off or reduce 50, 60, 100, larger events. And when I say, we've got this basin here, channel, everything was size-based, dependent upon the outflow from this basin. So this basin was sized to detain, not store, the 25-year event. And it's going to meter it out. And so, like I was saying, we metered it out at the narrowest point of the channel, which is not coincident with the 25-year event. So that's why we have this footprint. If we had a smaller basin, then it'd be a totally different scenario, or a larger one.
And the maintenance and cleaning on that, do you have a timeline how, because tons of sand. So how long do you project that it's gonna take to fill up that pond to where it'll have to be cleaned?
We haven't gone into that detail at this level. Remember, what, initially what we're trying to do is provide the city with the first building block to go after federal grant money. And with the 25-year event being the target, and those types of details get developed during, you know, if a grant's awarded, then you go to final design, then you start fine-tuning things. You know, I might have a projected cost of something for 800 grand, and then as the time comes down, the time of construction might be 500 or something.
Or $1.5 million.
Or $1.5 million.
But Jack, keep in mind, every year or twice a year, Public Works Department is out cleaning out the detention ponds already south of the Blanco Arroyo. So we don't anticipate that this detention pond is going to be any different, because we live in the desert, and when the water comes down there, all the arroyos into this detention pond, it's going to carry sediments. And we're going to be up there digging this detention pond out just like we do all the rest of it.
And if it's been twice a year, it's only been in the last maybe 2 years that that has been done, because they went for years up there without being cleaned.
Okay, well, I know for a fact we cleaned them out 3 times this year.
And
So-
what about the arroyos?
Well,
Are they still leaving that up to somebody else to do it?
the arroyo, the Blanco Arroyo still remains on private property.
And we've given permission to it, you own a big chunk of it, my husband's cleaning it out.
And so we will
It's
have,
gone.
right, so we will require formal easements or right-of-way case or donations in order for us to do anything with the arroyo. The city will not work on private property without written easement.
And nobody's ever said that. I mean, giving you
Well,
guys permission.
okay, so, again, part of this whole study began when we began with the survey to see where the buildings were in relation to the Blanco Arroyo, the Hampton Arroyo, and the Williams Arroyo. So we have some of that information now, and part of this whole construction maintenance program will be to approach the adjacent property owners and start trying to get some of the easements we are going to need. I think if you remember discussions in previous meetings here, that any kind of funding that we get from FEMA or the federal government or the state cannot be used on private property. So any kind of money we get can only be spent on city-owned property. So keep that in mind when we start moving forward and trying to get this money. We're going to need some help from you all and some cooperation and partnershiping so that we can get some of this construction done. Because again, with federally funded projects, we cannot build on your property.
Is there grants or funding for people with personal property to be able to, like, concrete the arroyo, put up walls, put ponds? I mean, I see it all the time in Albuquerque and lots of other places where they have it's concreted, so that way the water doesn't go into the homes on the other side.
Jim can probably answer.
The walls that you see in Albuquerque are put up as a function of the subdivision, and they are by no means designed to stop water. They do to a degree. There are grants out there for personal property, but typically they are post-disaster grants that would be considered individual assistance from FEMA. And for those to happen, unfortunately, you need to be in the footprint of that disaster zone. So the stuff you've seen on TV that they're doing in Baton Rouge or maybe after Katrina or what have you, yes, there are grants that'll do that and help you get back on your feet and fix things, but they are centric to the disaster zone. The grants that we were focused on with our intent here are what's called mitigation grants, and they're available to the entire state for whatever disaster, if a disaster is declared. So as an example, if Deming tomorrow has an earthquake and Deming is declared a federal disaster zone, a percentage of the money that comes from the federal coffers is put aside for mitigation grants for anybody within the state of New Mexico, or any public entity within the state of New Mexico, to apply for. And there's an application process. Part of that application process is the engineering, and that's what we're providing us from this. So that's how that target goes. So we're really, I mean, you're waiting, unfortunately, however that sounds, you're not an ambulance chaser, but you're really waiting for that mitigation money to be available through various means.
And remember, anything that's constructed within the Arroyo has to still be approved by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Exactly, yeah. So the other parts of that permitting process is a feasibility study, cost-benefit agreement, you need environmental controls. If you're in an area that's had cultural, so ancient Indian, that sort of thing, you need to go through that kind of permitting process. The big parts of it, though, the biggest hurdle is the engineering. Is the project capable of being built? How much will it cost? Does it do the right thing?
Well, and then again, I say, we still have to convince the Army Corps of Engineers that this is the right thing to do. So even if you would own, which some of you do, own part of the Arroyo, you could not actually go out in that Arroyo and build a structure without the approval of the Corps.
Has the Corps named this as a U.S. waterway?
404 water?
Excuse me, so for Blanco and Hampton.
Yeah, and
They have.
yeah. Well, that's what they tell me. Because, well, for instance, the city applied for and received a 404 permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to redo the culvert under North Rio Grande at the Blanco Arroyo. So they are claiming ownership of the Blanco Arroyo. And I received that permit last year, actually. Or about 8 months ago.
Oh, yeah, question?
Before, Mr. Martinez talked about putting curbs and maybe water gutters on Blanco, and one of you gentlemen mentioned that for the streets where the houses are lower than the street, that wouldn't make sense. Would you just explain that to me like a Michael Scott?
Well, if your house, if you're on Blanco and you currently drain, if the drain drains towards the road, if you were to put a curb and gutter, all of a sudden your house would be here, and your curb and gutter's here, and the water would have nowhere to go. That's what you're alluding to, right? So then you'd have ponding essentially in the yard and perhaps getting into a basement.
But that ponding would be only from our own watershed on our own property. I
Well,
think the
or
problem that
the
we have-
neighbors.
Yeah, but the problem we have is not from my immediate neighbors. I'm sure it's not from Mr. Martinez. The problem that everyone has, I live on Lover's Lane, is that the water is coming from the public street onto our properties. And it's not, and I know that the street is higher than the house, but I'm pretty sure the house has been there a lot longer than the street in those neighborhoods around there. And as streets were redone, or, road base was brought in, and I'm sure everything was just a dirt path when all those houses were built. So obviously, you wouldn't say, oh, I think I'm going to buy this house, it's lower than the street, this looks like a great deal. But
So part of the problem over on Lover's Lane, and I think you know this, is that the water that's coming from the street is coming in the driveway. So even if you have 6-inch vertical curb, that's still going to go away at your driveway.
I'm not
So
necessarily,
as
I'm
it
talking
comes
about a
down
little
this-
bit of curb, but also like maybe some storm sewer grates, or we have a bunch of watershed that comes from the high school maintenance yard. There's just a big barren spot, and it just rolls right down.
Well, okay, but
A holding pond there would be nice.
to put in storm sewer grate, that's pretty easy, just go out and put a drop inlet in a location, but you have to have the pipe that goes with it.
Yeah, of course. I'm talking
So
about
now
the
you're
whole
digging
enchilada.
up the whole street and putting the pipe in, and somewhere trying to find out where that pipe is gonna outflow. So it's not as easy as just putting a drop in. So, just trying to see.
No, I'm not talking about my case in particular, but just in general. A lot of people in that area we're not so concerned about the water coming from our own personal watershed, it's what's coming onto our property. Yes, sir, Sheriff.
Challenge would be if you've got water flanking, if you were to implement some vertical curb and gutter, you could get water jumping that curb because of, wave action due to a vehicle or something, water getting back behind that. If you really wanted to do that the right way and implement curb and gutter, you would really want to go in and lower the road.
Sounds great.
Up to a foot. Put in the curb.
Sounds like.
That's how you would have to, just by virtue of putting in curb and gutter, you would have a challenge, that would be, I don't know if that would offer you a whole lot of advantage.
It's becoming a larger and larger project, which fees go up, construction goes. Yep.
Could we go to the Kokopelli slide? Now, I live on Little Rabbit, and I can tell you, I get where I don't like rain anymore. I cringe every time it rains because there's a wash
Oh, no.
right there,
Yeah.
right there. So every time it rains, and I've lived there 19 years, and for the first 10, I never had any trouble, and then like the last 9 has been a nightmare. So luckily, it only went through my house one time during the 500-year flood. On the 100-year that we have, and then just a month ago, that wasn't even what I consider a 100-year, and that wash next to my house looked like the Animas River. And so what I worry about is all of that water is dumping on the street, which I get about 2 foot of mud out in front of my house, but then all that water is running down on all my neighbors down below me. And
It all ends up right here.
it's scary. So
Well, part of what we're gonna, recommendations for the next steps is implementing a basin here that is gonna serve as dual function trap center.
Right.
So actually, I've already talked to the property owner that is
Back behind me.
south of you,
Uh-huh.
and we are trying to get a permission and agreement with the Chaffee Group to install a detention pond catch basin for the sand and silt as well as the water, so we can control it pretty much probably right behind your house.
I really think that it'll help a lot just stopping those 2 washes.
Well, believe me, the Public Works Department is tired of going out there and cleaning it.
I know you are.
Is that not BLM land?
No.
It's private?
It's
No,
private.
it is
back
private,
behind
no.
me.
Huh.
I think over on the east side is some BLM, isn't it?
Maybe off the map.
Yeah, but I think south of me is all private property.
Right. And I've already started those discussions.
So do you have permission, or are you just in discussion?
Well, a handshake permission.
Okay.
Good.
But, it has to, as I said a minute ago, everything has to be legalized and on paper and formal easements and agreements and so forth before we can move in on private property and do anything. It's a liability thing.
It's nice to know you're actively seeking those easements.
Yeah, well, we're working very hard on drainage improvements throughout the whole city. It may not look like we're doing much, but behind the scenes, we're turning gears.
Do we have a time frame on this? Or an estimate, at least?
Well, it's on the list.
But it depends because, like Jim was mentioning earlier, that the mitigation grant process can take some time. You have to have a disaster somewhere in the state to apply for those funds. To get in line for those funds, you want to have a package ready that you can submit, because there is a window for that year's declaration. And then so I think the package that we're going to be preparing is going to look at the maybe the larger construction projects that we're proposing, for instance, like this channel or the storm drain. And then, Bill's crews in Public Works is going to focus on making the improvements, such as curb and gutter or the pipe upgrades up here. And part of that is because he can do that whenever he wants, whenever the city has funding. The federal grant could take, what, a year, 2 years? I mean, it depends on.
It's at least a 6-month period of time once you submit the paperwork.
And then after that, you got to go through final engineering, the bid process, and so I mean, you can at least.
So essentially, we're hoping we get flooded again, to apply for the grant, or?
Somebody
Any-
else.
Somebody else.
Dimming gets closed. Somebody else's.
Really what you need is
Somebody
money,
else's
right?
turn.
This could be done tomorrow if you had an unlimited supply of money. That's how it is. And so grant funding is one avenue to that funding. There are other avenues.
I think the frustration those of us that live in Kokopelli have is we assumed that we were moving into an area that was new to Aztec and it had a flood plan and before the subdivision was put in. So like I said, I lived there 9 years and it never was an issue. And now we're going, and we get upset. We're not mad at the current people. They didn't approve it, but someone did. And so we're stuck with it. We're stuck with it, and that happens and trying to, salvage our property.
Well, we're
So-
trying to help you out.
I know, we know you are. We know you are. We just get frustrated every time. Like I said, I don't even like to see a rain cloud come from the south. I just cringe.
So do we. Trust me, so do we.
Are the, can I ask, are the storm drains actually working on French Drive?
They're undersized.
They're undersized, or are they actually clogged from that,
Are you talking here?
that leachy hill, or whatever you want to call it?
The storm drains that went on French Drive, are you talking on Spotted?
Actually, French Drive, where, see, I'm trying to see it right there. Follow French Drive back around.
Sprint Road.
That's Amazon.
Oh, that's right. That French right there.
Yeah.
Now, if you go up to your left a little bit more, go around that curve, there's that big hill of clay.
Oh, right.
And that just, every time somebody gets sweaty, that whole street is packed with mud. I just can't believe that the storm drains could possibly go under this bridge.
When we were out here and in the field looking at those, we have pictures of all the inlets, but, it's hard to tell what's, midway in the pipe, but the inlets didn't appear clogged necessarily, or the outfalls didn't appear to be clogged, but there's more than likely sediment within the pipes.
Well, if you see a clogged inlet, you call the Public Works Department, we got a back truck and we'll go out and clean it out.
Well,
Well,
I guess
part
my
of what we
point-
saw
I
was
guess my
clear
point is, that is a major source of, it's probably the major source of the water that's going down and then ending up on Sabina, is everything that comes down French, and French gets, the storm sewers. I can't see how the storm sewers could possibly work.
Well, and that little mountain that you're talking about doesn't help either.
Yeah, because every time we get a minor drizzle, that French Drive is a dirt road.
That's right.
And I don't know if there's any kind of mitigation that can be done about that. I'm open to suggestions, but.
So, approach the property owner and have him take some responsibility.
Who is it?
I don't know.
There's a for sale sign on it.
It's for sale.
Is that
Yeah.
But there isn't a French drain there until after the curb up there by the house where the handicapped people live.
Yeah.
That's the first storm drain.
There's a prevalence, the inlets in the Kokopelli all seem to be on the order of 3-foot long basins, and the details aren't really on this map, but what we're really showing in this intersection and what we've kind of conceptually modeled back in our office is inlets that are 3 times that length, so much larger inlets. When you go about the business of designing these, you also account for a clogging factor. So you reduce that, not to get down in the weeds of what we're doing. But,
Well, that gets back to what Jack was concerned about, the oversized culvert. Half of that culvert may be clogged with silt and sand. So that's why you want a bigger culvert, because you have to account for clogging, which you've seen in that culvert under North Rio Grande.
I do want to make.
And all the existing ones across.
You can't put big enough, until that hill is mitigated, you can't put big enough drains down. You can't, they will be 70-80% clogged until something's done about that hill. And that's causing a great deal of this problem.
So we have some big plans, but all we need is some money now, so if you wouldn't mind writing us a check on your way out.
Well, no, I'm saying we need to get to that property over there and figure out something that we can keep that from running down.
Well,
I mean, what I'm talking about is a low cost.
You could probably, that might be something you could address with just a sediment trap on that property that would certainly help or reduce some of that.
Well, okay. I have no engineering background.
Or maybe some kind of hardened treatment to that hill slope, but I mean, that, you know, a simple solution, shotcrete that slope. But I mean, you'd have to engineer that slope, you just wouldn't go out there and shotcrete the way it is. You'd have to grade back a certain slope and configuration for that shotcrete to hold. Or maybe there's some other BMP type.
Well, but there again, you know, we go back to the privately held property and city forces working on that and easements and ownership, and that's the first step. We gotta get the property owner on board with what we're doing. Permission to use the property, agreements and easements set forth for us to do anything in it.
Yeah, well, if the guy that owns it is who I think he is, one of the nicest guys I've ever met, happens to be a dirt man.
Okay,
So we could get, if that worked out, we could get a lot of his property.
well, we're working on that. It's like we were saying before, you know, you start with the solutions downstream and work up.
Bill, over back across from our house on Sabina by Robert and Debbie's where the wash comes to the road. And then we had discussed this a while back about like a retention wall on their side of the ditch, and then again like an L to divert it down that channel way by Sunland. It goes straight to the ditch. It's a natural drainage. Are you going to do anything about it like that?
We have a plan, and we're moving forward with our plan,
Which is,
what I told you before.
but nothing as far as utilizing that drainage?
No, not at this time.
Once you get the property owners, the permission and stuff for that channel, and wasn't there one on Blanco too, the channel?
Well, the Blanco Arroyo.
Oh, yeah. But when you get the permission from whoever for that channeling, is that something that we can do in-house, or is that the actual channeling, once you get the right-of-way and the permission?
Maybe, perhaps.
Okay.
Perhaps, it just, we'll have to see. I mean, you know, it's all labor and money
Right,
and materials,
right.
and, you know, where the city wants to focus and spend the budget. So, and there's a lot of areas around town, Blanco, Kokopelli, Williams, you know, all over town, cross pans all over the place, and so.
I know, you only have so many resources.
Yeah, and that kind of ways, and like I said, Josh and I've been trying to figure out where to go next. So.
I wasn't sure, I don't remember how deep they said that channel would have to be, but I was just wondering if we had the equipment and to do that.
Well, we can do some of that work.
All right, any further questions? Should we move on? Okay. Let's see. Where were we? All right, so there's the existing condition for Kokopelli. The hot spots that we really focused on based on feedback from the previous meetings were in this area. These cul-de-sacs which are acting as the outfalls for what seems to be the entire drainage right now. This intersection and the flooding coming through this area right here. And so, after implementing some of what we've been discussing into the hydraulic model, you'll see that the flooding footprint has been reduced, flood depths have been reduced. It's tough to see on this particular map, but if you look closer at these, before we had, for a 25-year event, on the order of a foot plus of flood depths right here at this house, and now we're talking maybe a tenth or two. And so these solutions, you can see how they're impacting the flood depths. And then as well, you can see the before condition at this particular intersection where we're, a foot and a half deep, and then now that flood depth and footprint has been greatly reduced. And a lot of that has to do with this proposed channel right here, which is cutting a lot of this flow off. What we do not have modeled right now is this basin that Bill's been talking about with the agreement with that development group. So that would essentially minimize or reduce all this. However, we're still planning on updating this with an outfall right here, which will drain this cul-de-sac faster and reduce the footprint there. So that's the impacts of the proposed recommendations for each of these areas.
And those, just as I mentioned earlier on the Blanco, the solutions Mark is talking about are all at the top end of the watershed and provide more bang for your buck.
And then we got a pretty robust storm drain system here, conceptually designed to carry runoff into the Hampton. And so what does that all mean as far as dollars wise goes? Currently we have approximate costs that range from 700 to 1.3 for Blanco and 600 to 1.1 for Kokopelli.
That's 1.1 million.
And that does not include right-of-way acquisition, which could have considerable impacts to these fees.
What do you mean by that?
If somebody were to give up a piece of their property, right-of-way costs money. And so for every property owner that would have to give up, per se, if the community wanted to channelize Blanco Arroyo the entire way all the way to the Animas, and it required a 20-foot, well, you mentioned you've got at least a 30-foot, 35-foot right-of-way.
I mean, you'd have to purchase that right away?
Right.
Or, okay.
I mean, that's what I mean by we'd include any right-of-way costs for that. And the reason there's a range is because of the materials that we evaluated. A concrete box culvert could be 2.5 times, 3 times as expensive as one of the corrugated metal pipes. A concrete channel could be twice as expensive as a rock channel. So that's why you see the range.
The lake or the base catch basin on Blanco, that's mainly BLM property, isn't it, where you got the proposed site? Or is that also on?
At least some of it's on private property.
Yeah.
About half of it is, isn't it?
There's a chunk of it that
Yes.
is.
And that gentleman would like to receive some compensation.
Where exactly is the detention on your map? Where exactly is it? See a picture, but I can't place.
Yeah, everybody, well, is that the purple?
Yeah.
That's the purple.
So a guy by the name of Gordon Weaver lives right here, and it's just on the other side of his property. All right, so now we're going to wrap it up, and then Sherrick and I will be here to answer questions from the engineering perspective, and Jim can answer some further questions regarding grants and grant scheduling and stuff like that.
So you guys had a lot of real specific information. I know everybody's really concerned about their home, and I can't blame you. I mean, that's your house. It's where your family is. It's where your life is. Our attempt was to look at big picture solutions that could be fundable. There are a lot of other solutions out there, and as I said before, mitigation doesn't stop, right? So even if we did complete this project tomorrow magically, there'd still be more to do. There's always going to be more to do, more solutions to find. And so keep the ideas coming, but also have patience with that process. I don't know what your political process is. We're going to be here to help as long as you're willing to engage us to do that, but it's going to take patience. It's going to take time. It's going to take money, no matter what the solutions are. So where we're going with this project next, we're going to complete our 30% conceptual report with those drawings. It'll include the information that was used to create these images, the engineering that was done to do that. We're going to finalize our cost estimates, tighten those numbers up a little bit, maybe refine them based on some of the things we've talked about tonight. And then look for potentially phase two. So right now, that's where AECOM's engineering stops. So phase two for this project for us might be to choose specific projects that would then go through final engineering design. Also assist you in looking for that funding opportunity. So as Bill said and I said earlier, it's more than just engineering. You've got to do cost-benefit analysis, and you've got to do your environmental permitting and culture permitting. So there's a lot that goes into just getting that grant application ready to go when that is available. Or if you were to self-fund it, you would still need to do additional engineering and find the funding and do the actual construction work. So that's kind of where we are now. We don't have any other public meetings planned at this point. And so that's really the end of our presentation. We've got maps out on the walls. We've got a couple sets of them here. So we're going to be here. If you want to get your nose down the map and take a look at it, we can answer more of your questions potentially, or talk with you about what we've learned looking at your community. Yes, sir.
Probably Mr. Watson. Something was said early on about clearing brush and trees, Hampton, Arroyo, to improve flow. And that's something that's been discussed. I mean, that's Corps of Engineers.
Well, that's kind of, I think we talked about this early on, and I think that actually we could probably clear those without getting clearance from the Corps, because that's kind of a maintenance activity. When I said that you'd have to have a permit from the Corps to place anything in the Arroyo, that would cover things like concrete walls, that kind of stuff, because that's considered fill. To remove trees and that kind of thing would be maintenance activity. So we could probably do that without even letting the Corps of Engineers know we were doing it. Here again, though, on Hampton Arroyo, that's all private property, and the city would not undertake that without some kind of easement and permission from Hampton. And if I remember right, we studied and looked at actually removing vegetation and trees in the Hampton Arroyo, and we determined that we didn't think that was necessary, at least in the upper part of it.
It's not necessary. I mean, we looked at that big 2015 rainfall event. We generated a runoff value that ran the hydraulics for it, and it has sufficient capacity to convey the 500-year storm event. And so don't think that it's necessary to clear trees within the arroyo itself. However, clearing at the bridges, where they're blocking them in some cases, would be beneficial.
Now, the lower part of the Hampton Arroyo, down where the North Main corridor, where we're improving it down here, right before where it dumps into the river, that whole stretch from, say, Highway 550 on down to the river, that does need some serious attention as far as maintenance and tree removal and that kind of thing. But we don't have the capability or the property, I don't believe, in that area to do anything about it yet. So that's a long-range project that's on the list, but it does not have priority at all right now because of some other priorities.
Sorry, that's me.
You're not going to get in trouble with the Corps of Engineers if you do cut down trees on your property.
No, you are not.
No wetland violations?
No, not in the Hampton Arroyo. But take care, if you're upstream, take care that you don't do anything that is going to negatively negatively impact people downstream. You know, be a good neighbor, and your neighbors will appreciate that when they live downstream, so they don't get flooded.
So what can we do as citizens to help with the funding or that grant application? That our state isn't in very good shape right now with oil and gas revenues like that to try to get pork money or anything. So I know we're going to have to probably count on grants.
Well, you know, honestly, if you live in the Kokopelli area, or if you live somewhere else in town, and you think that you would like to have 6-inch vertical curb in front of your house, the city always takes grants. We'll definitely let you pay for that 6-inch vertical curb. So you ask how you can help.
Well,
That's part of, right?
6-inch vertical curb won't help me at all. So.
Right. So I'm just saying.
Yeah. But there's nothing we can do to help put together documentation or anything to.
Well, for the immediate parts of the project, the science that's involved doesn't require individual documentation. So we don't need folks to go out and take a picture of their house and say, look, the water was up this high. Right? It's all a statistical analysis. If you are indeed flooded in the future, I do encourage all of you to go out and take those pictures of the high water marks and the impacts to your homes and send them in the mail to your congressman, because the federal government can issue that. Congress can stipulate money to fix problems outside of anything we've talked about today. It's in their power. You've heard of pork barrel, or what they call it, earmarks, all that other stuff that does happen. Bill also alluded to, or actually said, you could buy flood insurance. I know that in some cases it's expensive, but it's cheaper to buy it than it is to pay for it all yourself. You can get preferred risk policies. I'm not an expert on flood insurance, but there are people out there that can help you. Something you also want to keep in mind is your impacts will impact your neighbors. So little things like don't throw trees into the arroyo, or take care of how you're moving dirt or setting them around your home, are something you really need to consider. So going out and digging a moat around your house, well, that's going to maybe keep you dry, but that water's going someplace else. You might be liable for that. Keep that in mind.
We've already seen that with retaining walls and stuff, how it's redirected and
right.
it dumps on other people. It protects them, but it dumps.
And that's a lot of why we're here, because it'd be easy for Bill to go out and start dropping pipes in and doing all sorts of engineering, concrete stuff, but unless you think about it, look at it, a holistic plan, you might do more harm than good. And that's not something that anybody wants to go about and deal with. So that's kind of where you're at with it, but then you can also support your local government, however you want to do that, to start facilitating the necessary change to get the funding that you're going to need. Even if you were to get a grant, you're still going to have to come up with a community match for it. That's 12.5% to 25%, depending on the grant. So it could be some real money that, even with the grant, that you're going to have to produce.
Well, we can do a GoFundMe page or
Sure,
something.
whatever that might be.
They take 8%.
Oh, do they?
Okay, so if there's no more questions, we'll hang around and talk to you individually and show you on the map what we think is going to happen. We appreciate you coming out. This will be the last public meeting for this phase of the work. Thank you so much for coming.
How are you?
Have a good night, everybody.
No, he didn't tell me. He told Jerry.